Hey, folks. Welcome back to another great episode of 6 Feet Apart. No relation to 6 Feet Under. Here at Vermont Studio Center, another day of weather. It snowed this morning. I don't even know what day it is, though. Or what is time anymore. Today we've got an interview that my friend and roommate and coworker Sarah Audsley did a few days ago with Sam Tucker. But what does she write? Poetry? None of this is fiction.
So you were a resident here in September 2019, right?
Yep. So was it 6 months ago now?
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
When you were a resident here at VSC, what were you working on?
So I was working on two things. I was working on a memoir about roller derby and my derby team, Ohio Roller Derby. And I was doing work on a memoir that's probably feels like my life's work. And I've been working on in some shape or form for the last decade. And it's called The American Dream Starts Here, tentatively. It was an essay collection, and I'm in the process of editing it and changing it into a full-length memoir.
I did a little research and I looked at some of your work that's published online. And I love Ecotone as a journal, and I really enjoyed your piece in that. And I'm interested in how you conceive of managing time, like structurally in your work, and also that piece feels like it's very committed to place as well. And I know that you use a lot of that in your work, like where you're from. So there's like a little excerpt that was highlighted on that piece. You wrote, "There are fountain girls who try to leave but cannot outrun their hometown legacy. There are fountain girls who never even stumble upon the chance to try."
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk about managing time in your work and how you conceive of place in your work.
I wish I could remember which famous, amazing author said this, but it's a quote that I've read in some shape or form many times over the years, that geography is self, or place is self. And I think that really is the ethos behind all the work that I read, is that every person has a great and complicated context, and that context is where you come from, who you grew up around, how you grew up financially, how you look, and how the world reacts to you in response. And so for me, place is where all of that kind of starts, is the basis of that. And I grew up so Fountain Girls is about, this small town in Colorado that is strangely diverse in a very, very white state. And it is diverse because of the military, because there's an Army base and there are 2 Air Force bases. And my family was poor. We didn't travel, even as a military family. I have a grandmother from Korea and a grandmother from Germany. So we have international ties, but they immigrated and they never made a lot of money. And so we were not only of the place that I grew up in, we weren't of anywhere else, really. And my exposure to culture was through my grandmothers. But otherwise, what I knew of the world was limited to this very conservative evangelical place surrounded by military bases, and also somehow, a lot of people of color, a lot of people of very different classes. I am kind of obsessed with this idea of place and geography and how it informs self. In terms of how I write about time, I think that can really, this is one of the bigger issues in making an essay collection or turning an essay collection into a memoir, which is really more about market concerns. Because if you don't have a name or a platform and you are someone who writes about nonfiction, the idea is that essays don't sell, even as essays are like the most widely read, form of writing in the world. So as an essayist, as someone who prefers to write in shorter form, and someone who I like speaking about myself in the third person. When it comes to essay, I feel like my job is to witness the world and to call on universal experiences and kind of smash them together with local or personal experiences to try and find an unexpected thread, something that people probably wouldn't realize they have in common. And so for me, an essay works in a way that's about creating patterns and kind of quilting different times and contexts together in this very circular, and it's kind of like based on impulse and subconscious ideas, whereas memoir has to be linear chronologically. It doesn't have to be, but that is an expectation. And so that I struggle with that because you like how much I'm talking.
Like the pieces that I read of yours online are non-linear, and they manage time with chunks of information, and that allow the reader to make those associative leaps for themselves. And I can understand like that, the challenge of writing a memoir, but I don't think it has to be linear. I think you can manage time however you want, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I it's good to hear that too, because I think I have gotten stuck in this place where I think I am an essayist first and foremost, and I think really what it is it's just daunting. It's daunting to not be able to share my life in, short spurts. It's daunting to think about covering the whole of what I want to say in one book. I mean, it's scary to just be like, I'm going to sit down and write a book. So, I've spent a lot of time standing up and avoiding writing that book in the last decade.
When you're using the first person narrator, the first person speaker, how close is that speaker to you in particular, as like you as a person, or do you create any kind of distance?
So my background is in theater originally, and everything that I do end up writing out, a lot of the editing process is through me reading it aloud. And so I do think there is a closeness in my written voice to how I present in real life or to people face to face, because the sound and the cadence and the rhythm, those kind of things are important to me. But there is definitely a boundary. There's definitely, there's things there's choices I make for craft purposes. I think even when people write nonfiction, the audience has to be aware that the person that they are reading isn't exactly or precisely the person who is writing it, because it is art, even as nonfiction, even if it's truth and it's memoir, even if it's like more straightforward literary journalism, there is a distance there, because what you're doing at the end of the day is trying to figure out how you can best communicate not only what you're thinking, but how that feels, what that evokes in you, what you want it to evoke in the reader. And so I would say that it's heightened, that I think I get a lot of my own anger out in my writing. I'd like to think I'm not that angry in person, unless like someone ate all the rest of the Cheetos. That really pisses me off. There's a difference. Like even with your poetry, you write a lot of nonfiction based stuff, right? What do you feel like the difference is between you, Sarah, and then the narrator of your poetry?
I think that there's definitely like, the Emily Dickinson quote is tell all the truth, but tell it slant. And I think that the first person speaker in my poems is definitely me, but I can lie, I can embellish, I can use metaphor. I don't actually remember what it felt like to be in utero, so I'm definitely making that up. So yeah, I think that we have to protect our inner lives as well as take risks in our writing. And I wanted to kind of dovetail on that piece of the conversation and kind of talk about how you've navigated writing about your brother's death, which I think when you were a resident here at VSC, that was one of the pieces that you read at your resident presentation. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, I was very struck by your performance of the piece itself, maybe part of the difficulty it is to write about those types of things.
Yeah.
And basically it's part of your life too. It's like,
it's interesting because I feel like it also kind of dovetails with what's happening now and how globally we're faced with a world that hopefully doesn't return to how it was before, because we need to, the future is here essentially, right? Things are scary and we're facing a lot. I just know in my life, which I have so often marked by enormous tragedy, by my brother's death in Iraq. My dad actually OD'd on meth when I was 16. 9/11 was my senior year of high school. And I think that writing was a way for me to kind of control my environment, or to feel like I had a say in my environment. And I think that kind of evolved into a place where it was like I needed validation from myself about what I was feeling and how the world was affecting me, because it doesn't affect everybody in the same way. That put me in places in my life where I felt almost gaslit, where it was like my understanding of the world, or my version of the world, so didn't line up with other people's that I had to get it down on paper, because that was how I could work through it and how I could make sense of it. With my brother, so his death was in 2008. I had already been writing quite a bit up until that point. I was in New York City for a time and like writing for Show Business Weekly and writing theater reviews. And then this thing happened. I shut down. Like it pretty much just stopped my whole family in our track. So it took a long time for me to come back to writing. And once I did, it just came out. Like it opened the floodgate. There wasn't necessarily an artistic impulse behind it. It was just, again, this place of I need to feel like I have a say in everything that's happening to me. And I can literally have a say if I get it down on paper. I feel like all art, everyone who creates art, even if they don't mean to be political, to write, to make, to create art is a political act. And what I wanted to do more than anything was to make people feel what it felt like for my family to go through something like that, in the hopes of making unnecessary death and war, illegal war, all of these things to stop. So I think I've said the word control several times now, but I do think a lot of my art comes from a place of me trying to control the narrative, or to take that narrative back and reclaim it from people who use it for convoluted patriotic reasons, and say, hold on a second, you don't actually know what you're talking about. Here's what it's really like. And you said something earlier about like speculative nonfiction, like you don't really know what it was like in utero, right? I write a lot of stuff like that too, and I've written about his death in that way, like trying to imagine his last days in Iraq and trying to understand what it was like for him, but still trying to capture the truth or the fact in any given situation, the truth of the feeling, the fact of what it is to be human, and in these difficult, very, very painful environments.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned speculative nonfiction, and how now I think that we can really bend those genres, and it's not straight nonfiction or fiction, or even poetry or lyric essay or hybrid. There's so many ways that writers are publishing and writing now. Feels like you can take those experiments, make those leaps, and take those risks and experiment really in form. How is your project going? What are you working on now?
I've been writing a lot of new stuff, which surprised me. And Ohio has been on lockdown for almost 3 weeks, going on 3 weeks now. So I do feel like in our state, things have happened at a much more accelerated rate, in terms of we have been taking precautions for some time now. And I have a lot of writer friends here that are like, I can't do anything. And kind of what I said before, I feel like I thrive in high stress, anxiety inducing situations. Like I kind of feel like, I am the edge. I work well on the edge because I have lived a life where a lot of this kind of shit is happening. So I've been writing a lot in the last few weeks. As I always am, I'm writing about politics and poverty and war and that crazy dude in the White House, and trying to make connections between my life, where I grew up, where I come from, and these things that are happening to everybody all over the world. So the piece that I'm working on right now is really about my living situation and this house that I live in. I actually got to buy a house with
Congratulations.
yeah, I know, I never ever thought that I would be able to buy a house. So I bought a house about a year and a half ago with some friends, and it's an interesting situation to be quarantined in. And I just have this drive to get it all down, to write down what is happening to each of us in our different jobs, and how lucky I feel to be in a place where I don't have a landlord. I don't have somebody that has any kind of dominion over, my living space, my safe space.
That's so wonderful.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam, I know that roller derby is a big part of your life.
I got my shirt
on. I don't know what that says. How are you?
Here's my team.
Oh. How are you keeping the Stoke alive? How are you staying fit?
Yeah.
And also, how are you incorporating that aspect of your life into your work?
This is what I always really want to talk about, is roller derby. We're all pretty devastated because basically Ohio went on lockdown right before our first bout of the season. And this is primo roller derby season. Like, basically the whole season is canceled now. The Derby, WFDA, Women's Flat Track Roller Derby Association, is international and reacted very quickly, very smartly. And so everything is shut down. But my team, because we're all kind of obsessed with each other, we're still meeting like twice a week on Zoom. We have Zoom meetings. So everyone's trying to stay positive. We have a trainer named Travis Moyer. He teaches this thing called DVRT, and it's like sandbag training. And this is the other part that really sucks because we're getting super strong. And since like January 1, we have been kicking ass. So we're trying really hard to keep that up, knowing that it's, we're probably not gonna be able to do anything possibly till next season. There's a library across the street, and I went to the library parking lot and I was starting to skate laps there, and a goose dive bombed my head and then chased my ass out of the park. I got it on film. The goose was furious. So I guess even the library parking lot is off limits at this time. In terms of writing about roller derby, again, it's always find a way to make everything, or to note the politics of any given situation. And derby is still really counterculture. There is nothing cooler than being with women and non-binary people. And I'll just say it, like, not with cis white dudes all the time. It is so freeing. It is so safe feeling because I am a louder and sometimes assertive and or aggressive person. I have often struggled with male relationships in my life. I have male friends that are just like me, and they don't struggle in the ways that I do, because some people really have an issue with a loud woman. And I have found a group of loud women. I have found a group of women who dress how they want and work out like beasts and talk about all the things that are important to me: healthcare, access, race, all of these things. It's a magical, magical space. When people talk about bubbles, I feel like I'm in the coolest, glitteriest rainbow bubble of all time. And we are all very, very different. The book that I wrote, I'm worried that it ended up just being me fangirling over my teammates for like 150 pages.
Aww.
But it's admirable because we fund ourselves. We run it. There is no roller derby unless we schedule the bouts, and we run ticketing, and we do marketing. And so there is this also very beautiful anti-capitalist punk rock, not only aesthetic, but mode that we operate in, because it is a nonprofit. We don't get any money from the government. It's kind of a miracle that the sport is the fastest growing sport in the world, and that people still don't come. I don't know why they don't want to watch us on skates with really, really cool makeup beating the hell out of each other. I don't get it. Yeah, the book was really a lot about, not just talking about what derby is, but how the act of derby and the space of derby, I just feel really lucky to have that space.
That type of community is so important, and I feel like that we try to foster that here at Vermont Studio Center. There are people, when I was a resident here, that I'm still in touch with. Hope that you were also able to find some of your people here at VC. Yeah, having those people that you can just be 100% totally yourself with is really important.
The thing about Vermont Studio Center is I feel like that was the first time in my life that I was around a group of adults who had established or were establishing a career or a life in arts, and that made the space unapologetic. And that's been hard for me as a writer and artist, especially from a blue collar place where my family's like, I don't get what you're doing. You don't make any money. You have 3 degrees, but you're still broke as hell. Why are you doing this? Why are you making this choice? It's not enough for me to say I don't have a choice in it. And at VSC, everyone, it was just accepted. There were no explanations. We were there because this is the thing that we do, whatever the outcome. It is like Derby, where we're here. This is who we are. Let's do our thing. It's beautiful.
Aw.
It feels so good to laugh again.
Oh my God. Sam, is there any last words you'd like to say to our VSC community?
I think that artists are more important than ever. Not nearly as important as nurses or grocery store workers or people who still have to work at the gas station, or, you get what I'm saying. Basically, though, our job is to record all of that. Our job is to take everything that's happening to everyone and to pay mind to the people who are getting screwed over, who lack power, and we should be telling those stories and spreading that in any way that we're able to, whether we're visual artists, whether we're fiction writers or poets or nonfiction writers. Like, it's our job to hold a mirror up to the world and say, hey, this is happening. It needs to stop happening this way. Or, hey, this is happening. Look at how humanity blooms in times of despair. That's our job. Take it easy, do what you need to do, order Domino's again, and Lysol it before you eat it. But then later, make your art, because it's important.
Aw. Bye, Sam.
Bye.
What's Harlan been up to? Let's check in with him.
Welcome to a life lesson with Harlan Mack. We have a bent nail from pulling it out, and we want to save it, so we want to unbend it. So what I mean by is, notice the curve? Well, we want to flatten the curve. So flattening the curve on any hard surface, you want to just make sure that you're keeping it from rotating as much as you can. Sometimes it's annoying, but most of the time it goes pretty quick. There we go. The curve has been flattened. The nail is once again usable. So you can do that on metal. You can do that on wood. Wood is actually kind of nice because it bites in a little bit. And you just want to flatten the curve. I don't know if you can see it, but the curve has been flattened. So I'm going to take another one. Life lesson with Harlan Mack is straightening a nail so you can use it again. Right? So that's all we're doing, is straightening a nail. That's hitting it into a 2x4 right there. This is the first job I did as a little kid that was actually useful. With that technology was I picked up every little bent nail I could find, and I straightened them all, and then I built a sculpture. Actually made a tractor out of wood, which I'm still doing today. What was a bent nail is now a straight nail. That's it. Here we go.
And now to Kristen with sports. Oh, you're over here?
Hey, one of the main power moves in breaking, b-boying, b-girling, b-womaning, I don't know why they don't have a b-womaning, is the head spin. There are all kinds of power moves, but we'll talk about those some other time. However, what I do have now is a hat made out of cardboard. This way, I can spin wherever I want and not even worry about one of these. We're gonna go back to that kick. Okay, put your head on the ground, and you wanna kick. And then you're gonna spin. And spin. This continuous head spin, Kid freezes nothing on us. Look at this. Woo. Nice job.
What a great day. Blessed day. It's a literary reference. What a pleasure this is to see you again. I can actually see you. And I'll see you again next week. But tune in again tomorrow.